What if Kashimo had been a team player and decided to be a part of the Shinjuku Showdown jumping instead of going for his 1v1? Let's talk about it, but spoilers beware. Alright, first of all, shout out to Otsukare for inspiring this video today, and he actually provided 4 specific scenarios where Kashimo helps that he wanted me to react to. So we'll go through these one by one. But a couple of things before we do. I'm going to assume that Kashimo is using his curse technique in all of these scenarios. Otherwise, I don't really think it makes much sense, right? Because he used the technique against Sukuna, so in this situation, let's assume he's going to use it in these scenarios, right? But Otsukare also says, let's give Kashimo Higuruma level RCT to make this more fun. And I'm assuming he's saying that with the implication being that if Kashimo had RCT, his curse technique wouldn't kill him. But I don't think that's true. And at least that's my interpretation of it. I should say it that way. I think even if Kashimo has RCT, his curse technique is still a one-time use and will still kill him. And I've talked about this in other videos, so I don't think the RCT element is really relevant here. But let's get into these scenarios. Okay, so scenario number 1, Kashimo fights Urum while Hikari joins Higuruma and Yuji. And in this case, I do think curse technique Kashimo will kill Urum, but simply adding Hikari to the start of that fight doesn't really move the needle for me. I still think they are going to lose to Sukuna under those circumstances, and it's going to take until Yuta Okotsu arrives and the fight play out as we saw it in the original series. So Urum dies in this scenario, and Kashimo, because he used his technique, but it really doesn't help the Shinjuku Showdown. Scenario number 2, Kashimo fights alongside Yuji, Higuruma, Choso, Kusakabe, and Ino, with the goal of having the Sword of Extermination kill Sukuna. And I think this is probably the best possible bet with a Kashimo that's helping everyone. If he uses Mythical Beast Amber and they give him Higuruma's Sword of Extermination, then perhaps they can tag Sukuna. I do think Sukuna is sufficiently fast enough to be able to avoid Kashimo. I think that Sukuna was largely toying not only with Kashimo, but with everyone else at the beginning of the Shinjuku Showdown, and this would probably cause him to lock in immediately. Now, Kashimo plus those other 6 people, might they be able to set something up to give Kashimo a window to strike Sukuna? Maybe, but we know that Sukuna has that web of waffle world-cutting slashes, right? So he might have just whipped that out and killed everyone instantly. But I will say that this might have been a way to get it done. Like, they might have been able to find an opening here. Scenario number 3. Kashimo goes and fights Kenjaku alongside Yuta, which frees up Todo to be in the fight against Sukuna from the very beginning. So let's react to both sides of this fight. First of all, for Kenjaku versus a tag team of Kashimo and Yuta, I think that would be an insane fight, extremely high diff. I know most people would probably say that Yuta and Kashimo just slam Kenjaku, but I don't think it's that easy. Kashimo is my 3rd strongest in the verse. He's got an open domain, and if nothing else, that could just be a win condition for him. But some important things to consider. Yuta probably isn't using his 5 minutes of Rika nor his domain expansion in this 2v1 because we know he needs to save those things for the Sukuna fight. So it's basically a just base level Yuta plus Mythical Beast Amber Kashimo versus Kenjaku. And in this situation, they're not getting the surprise on Kenjaku. Sure, he'll still be distracted by his fight with Takaba to some extent, but Yuta's not going to be swapped in by Todo from 500 yards away and get the jump on him in that regard, right? Kenjaku is going to have more of a reaction and window to actually engage with them. This won't just be a straight up sneak. And because of that, I think it favors Kenjaku. So I think he could just win with the domain, but again, this would be an insanely high diff fight that I think could go either way. But if Yuta gets pressed, he probably will use his domain and use that 5 minutes before he's just going to roll over and die, right? And with that happening, I think they do win, but then that makes things really bad for the fight against Sukuna, right? However, Todo has now been there the entire time. So to talk about that fight, I think they likely beat Sukuna earlier because Todo in Boogie Woogie is ridiculous. And there's a reason he was essentially written out of the story until the point where he came back. So Toto with Higuruma and the Sword of Extermination and those 50 swaps a second is probably enough to disorient Sukuna to where he gets tagged by it. And just to be clear here, because I'm sure some people are going to say, well, why didn't they just do that? Like, why didn't you just have Toto be on that part of the team to deal with Sukuna instantly? And the reason is Toto was their failsafe against Sukuna's domain. So even if he didn't go and fight Kenjaku with Yuta, he probably still would have been intentionally kept on the sidelines just so that he could swap people out from Sukuna's domain, because no one knew when Sukuna was going to get that back online. So my scenario I was just talking about is assuming that Toto does just join the fight instantly, but realistically he probably wouldn't because they needed that domain failsafe. And then finally, for scenario 4, Otsukare says, for whatever reason, Kashimo also happens to be late to the fight and arrives at the same time as Yuta does. I can't think of an excuse for him to be late. Maybe he was just grabbing a burger, and so he fights alongside Yuji and Yuta within Yuta's domain. And this is another one that might be their best bet, right? Because if we have Curse Technique Kashimo entering that fray, and it's now a 3v1 versus Sukuna, really a 4v1 if you want to count Rika's presence there, then maybe I could get it done. They don't have the Sword of Extermination in this case, so it's not going to simply be a one-tap KO. But we know that there were times when, Yuji was pinning down one arm, Rika was pinning down another, and Yuta was using a full maximum potential Jacob's Ladder on Sukuna. If in that exact same moment we have Mythical Beast Emperor Kashimo blasting Sukuna with his, electromagnetic charge or whatever it is, that could be enough to just get it done right there. However, an important thing to think about in all of these scenarios is that doesn't leave much of a window to actually save Megumi, right? Which could be another consideration for why this didn't happen. Although the main consideration is that obviously Kashimo would not agree to any of this because his entire life's purpose was to test himself 1v1 against Sukuna. But in this scenario, they probably could kill Sukuna, but that really wasn't what they were aiming for. All right, then next up, I got another question here, and it's not really on the same subject, but watch me segue, because we were talking about Toto a little bit. So EDG Bara sent in and said, all right, Toto versus full potential Junpei's mom. Listen, okay? Y'all already know how I feel about Junpei's mom, so just how dare you throw her, and her at full potential no less, against my GOAT, Toto, okay? Junpei's mom slams, okay? And yes, Toto is happy about it. Should have been there! Anyways, I guess that's going to do it for this one today. Y'all be sure to let me know all of your thoughts, both on Junpei's mom, but also, more importantly, these 4 Kashimo scenarios we discussed today. Do you think they would play out similarly to how I envisioned, or do you think it would go a completely different way? Let me know. And as always, thank you so much for watching.